Good morning.
Good morning.
Let everybody get loaded in.
I had to work last night,
Oh, yeah? How late?
9:45,
Oh, wow.
and I work tomorrow and Friday and Saturday.
Oh, you got a full week. That'll be a good paycheck.
Yep, but the good thing is I'm going on vacation on Sunday through Wednesday.
Oh, yeah?
I'm going to the beach.
Oh, that'll be nice. Hang on just a minute. Let's see. Alrighty. Sorry about that. Trying to go ahead and make plans for the afternoon. My daughter is supposed to be coming in a little bit. I know Claire Jane heard me earlier. She's going to be tested for COVID again. She got it this morning all congested and yucky, and she's been complaining about congestion, but right now I've got it too with the allergies and just all the mess, and it tickles my throat and makes me feel yucky, but no fever or anything. But she was like, I can't smell anything. So I was like, great. So she's going to be tested. So that means if she's positive, then I cannot get out of the house to go tutor anybody because I don't want to expose anybody. So I guess we'll just roll with it, whatever happens. I am so done with all this COVID stuff. We don't have Megan just yet. We'll hang on just a second. So hopefully by now you guys got the email that I sent that had not only our reading stuff for today, but it also had a reading practice test that we're going to kind of work on today and talk about the skills that we've learned. We're going to look at the passages and be able to identify the types of questions that we are dealing with. Also, I know for those of you that have been out, especially Victoria, I need to make sure that you've got everything you need. Remember that all of these videos are recorded and they are posted on the YouTube. So if you miss a class, you've got that video to go back to and go over. Now, the thing that I'm not real good with remembering is to email you the notes that you need. So I need to be sure to do that. So help me remember if you miss a class and I have not emailed you the notes, text me, email me and say, hey, I need these notes. One of the things I also realized as I was going through my bag is when we met in class last week, I handed out the remainder of the math, but then for some reason, when I handed out the math, I didn't hand out the reading that we went over. So I didn't actually hand you guys those pages that I had copied to give you. So I need to email you guys that as well. So I will be sending out an email at the end of class to make sure y'all got all those pages. So like I said, hopefully you've gotten what I sent you for today. If not, just follow along and then you can print it out.
I wasn't in class that way because truck issues and we had to wait on my dad to get home to help fix it.
Oh wow.
It just wouldn't start, and then we figured out the belt was seriously like on a thread from snapping.
Oh wow.
So we had to replace the belt again. That's the second time.
Well, but at least
is the belt to the alternator? Like on the alternator?
The tensioner belt, yeah.
Yeah.
That almost snapped.
Oh no.
Oof.
For the second time.
Oh wow.
Dang. I just now learned about that because I had to change the alternator with my dad for my sister's car.
Yeah,
Oh,
like
wow.
I also had to change the alternator in my truck because like on my way from like kind of like a fall festival from my old school, it just quit. Like on the middle of the I'm not running the highway, but just in the middle, just going home, quit.
Mm-hmm.
We had to get jumped,
Dang.
and then my dad brought his truck to jump us off. But then my mom brought my dad drove my truck. Somehow he got home, but with like 4 extra jumps.
Oh, wow.
But good thing we replaced the alternator, and while we did the alternator, we did the belt. So,
well, good.
I'm glad we got that fixed.
Yep.
And
car trouble is not fun at all.
It is not at all.
That's not what I want. Let's see. Okay, so last week we wrapped up our math, and then we started talking about the reading test. And one of the things that we're going to kind of do today is start by reviewing a few of those things that we wrapped up with at the end of last week. And so the first thing that we're going to be talking about is accept, EXCEPT, and not questions. So one of the things to notice is that when we're doing the reading test, the words accept and not are going to be in all caps. They're going to be capitalized, but even though we know that, it's real easy to read something because typically when we read questions for tests, all the tests that you've taken up till this point in your, middle school, high school career, it all says answer this question and tell what the answer is. Now we're asking questions and it says tell what the answer is not, basically. So it's saying all of these are answers except what. So we've been trained to answer questions in a certain pattern, but now we've got something that's kind of changing it up. And so it's requiring us to kind of think about the questions differently. Okay, so instead of just getting totally hung up on accept and not questions, we have a couple of strategies here to talk about. But then also one of the best things to do is when you encounter one of those questions, circle the word accept or circle the word not. That way you've got another visual cue that you are looking for something different than what you normally do. You're not looking to answer a question with what is the answer. You're looking for what is not the answer. That makes sense? So one of the things that I've got an example on here is to paraphrase, first of all, circle the word to make it stand out. Okay. The next thing is going to be to kind of paraphrase what the question's asking. And we've got a couple of examples of that right here. And so it says to start with the word eliminate. Okay. So when we look at this first one, it says the passage establishes that Vida and Ted have all of the following traits in common except. So the first thing I would do is I would circle that word in the question. And then I'm thinking about, okay, I need, to eliminate the trait that Vida and Ted do not share. Okay, so it says it's easier to focus on looking for the trait that they do not share instead of saying accept. So that way you're eliminating the traits that they do share. Did I write that wrong? Eliminate the trait. Now that I reread that, I want to amend that real quick. Eliminate the traits that Vida and Ted do share. Okay, because we want the one that they don't share to be the one that shows up. So mark out does not. I don't know why I thought eliminate the traits that Vida and Ted do share. So it's easier to focus on looking for the traits that they do share. That way you can eliminate those traits to reveal the one that is not. So mark out that not where it says where they do share, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, oh, they share this, so I'm going to eliminate it because that cannot be the answer. Eliminate the ones that they do share, then that way you're left with the one they do not. And then again, another example is which of the following is not an accurate description of the passage. When I hear the word not, then I go to eliminate accurate descriptions of the passage. That way, when I see the ones that accurately describe the passage, I'm able to eliminate those which means I'm going to be left with the answer that is not accurately describing the passage. Okay, so except and not, I want to eliminate the ones that do tell how things are alike or a good description. That way I can reveal the answer that is the not or the exception. And so these are kind of, these are harder because, like I said, we've been trained to answer questions. So a lot of times when we read that and it says, oh, does not, but then I see an answer that says, oh, this is how they are alike, my brain goes into that mode of, oh, well, I want to answer the question and it's common traits. Common traits, oh, look, here's common traits. That must be my answer. And I've lost the word except. Okay, so be real careful about except and not questions. The next thing I want to talk about, we talked about this briefly at the end of last week, common wrong answer types. So think about, when people are sitting down to create the ACT, not only do they have to pick the passages and come up with questions, but they have to come up with possible wrong answers, okay? So they have the right answer, but then they have to figure out, how do I write a wrong answer that could look like a right answer, okay? So these are kind of ways that they have set up developing wrong answers, okay? So these, but also knowing how they do that helps you to be able to eliminate those potentially wrong answers. And like I said, we're going to look at examples of all of these in the passage that we're going to go to in a little while. But the first one is partly wrong answers. Partly wrong answers are completely wrong answers. Make sure you read each answer choice carefully and completely. Students often read the first few words of an answer choice and then move on since they're in a hurry. So be sure you read the entire passage. An example I gave here is there was a statement that said, one of the examples they gave was Fran's mother was arrogant and cruel. Now from the passage, you may be able to get that her mother was arrogant, okay? But cruel would not be a word that you would use. So arrogant is correct, or arrogant is right, but cruel is wrong. So part of my answer is wrong, therefore the entire answer is wrong. But if you did not read the entire passage, or that entire question, you could look at it and go, oh, Fran's mother was arrogant. Yep, that's the right answer. If you don't read the entire passage or the entire possible answer, you don't know that they've put in a wrong piece that makes the entire thing wrong. So read the entire answer possibility completely before you make a decision. And look to see if you go, ooh, wait a minute, that part of this answer is not right, then that means the whole answer is not right. Okay? The next one is answers that echo the passage's wording. A lot of times, if there's a certain wording structure, the passage is written in a certain kind of dialect or whatever, the answer choices are going to be written the same way. So you're not looking, oh, this is kind of fancy big words and all my answers are fancy big words, but that doesn't mean that they're telling the correct content. So you want to make sure not necessarily to look at the wording or the way that it's written. You want to look at the content of the answer. And so that way, just because it's the word sounds similar to the scientific jargon that was presented in a natural science passage, doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be the right answer. You've got to look at the content for it. Look for answers that contradict the passage. Remember, contradict says, means that it's saying the opposite of, okay? So basically, a lot of times we may read something and make the connection and say, oh, well, this is connected to the passage, so that must be the answer. But then we don't realize, oh, wait, but this is saying the opposite of what the passage says. So a contradiction sometimes can trick you because it helps you make a connection to the passage, but yet that connection is an opposite relationship than what it should be. The next is flipped relationships. So again, some things are flip-flopped. Sometimes that connection, you may recognize that, hey, these characters were in there, but the relationship they're describing between them is not the way it was described in the book. Maybe you've got, I'm just going to make up something here. You've got Ted and Jane, and Ted is super outgoing and Jane is super quiet. But then in the answer, they'll say the super quiet Ted and the outgoing Jane. That way they're using the same characters, but they flip-flopped their traits. Okay, so you've got to be careful about that in a literary narrative. But then like in the natural sciences or in humanities or whatever, you may have someone that they're describing, or maybe it's two scientists that are presenting ideas, but yet they'll take the findings of one scientist and flip-flop them with the findings of the other scientist. So you've got to make sure that if they're giving character traits, if they're giving something about one person or one situation, that they actually do relate to another and that they're not flip-flopped. Okay. The next thing is agreeable answer choices are not always correct. Sometimes a wrong answer choice will present an answer that is a widely accepted belief, but it's not directly stated in the passage. Now, the only times that we're really going to be doing things that are where it's not like direct evidence in the passage is going to be like making inferences, things like that. But you want to be careful of, even though an answer choice may be something that's a widely held belief, if it's not directly stated in the passage, then you don't use that as your answer. And then we talked about your reaction versus the character's reaction. Sometimes we'll read a passage and we'll kind of relate to the character saying, oh wow, if I was in that situation, I would feel this way. We can't automatically assume that the character is going to react the same way that we would. So we want to be careful not to put our reactions and our feelings on a character if that's not what it says directly the character thought or felt or whatever. So we want to be careful about using your reactions versus the character's reactions. So those are some of our common wrong answer types. Okay, those are things that we're going to look at in a little bit. We're going to look at the answer choices that they give us and go, hey, look, this is an example of a relationship. This is an example of, just because it sounds like it's, right, because it's echoing, the wording of the passage. All right, so now we're going to talk more about the skills and reporting categories of the ACT reading portion. And one of the things that I just realized that I should have done is gone ahead and given an overview of the 3 reporting categories. So the first one we've got is called key ideas and details. Okay, so that's this first one here. Whoop. So we've got our key ideas and details. Let me make that lighter. This makes up 55 to 60% of the test. So this makes up a bulk of the test. And you'll see in a little bit when we go through the passage, when we identify these, we're going to see that a lot of these are key ideas and details. The other 2 types of questions that we will talk about more next week are going to be what are called craft and structure. And then the last one, let me find my word. Hang on just a minute. Let me go grab that real quick. Okay, sorry. So like I said, the first section is that key ideas and details, and that's a bulk of the test. The next one is going to be craft and structure. How did the author put together the passage? Why did they choose the words they used? What was the relationship here? And then the last one is called integration of knowledge and ideas. Now, integration of knowledge and ideas is going to be the smaller number of questions on the test. And like I said, next week we're going to go over craft and structure and integration of knowledge and ideas. But those are going to be kind of more of the higher level thinking, stuff like that. So basically, key ideas and details will be, because a bulk of the questions on the test relate to this, we want to spend more time making sure we understand what are questions related to key ideas and details. So that's what we're focusing on today. It says these questions may ask you to find facts used to support the main idea and ask you to make an inference based on the details from the passage. Okay, so one of our biggest things here will be main idea questions. Main ideas and inferencing are going to be the biggest parts of this type of question. So it says, when reading, it's important to ask yourself the following questions in order to better understand the main idea. So as you're reading, you're constantly saying, okay, what's the purpose of this passage? Why is it written? What is it about? What is the author trying to say? What is the author trying to convey? Are they trying to evoke a certain feeling or a certain reaction from the reader based on what they've written? So kind of as you're reading, going, okay, why was this written and what is it about? Okay, so having that in the back of your mind as you're reading, then you're going to be able to kind of look and go, oh, okay, well, guess what? This whole entire passage is about blah, blah, blah. So the main idea has got to be related to that. So when we're talking about literary narrative passage, unfortunately, literary narrative passage don't follow a specific structure. Okay, so because it doesn't follow a specific structure, I don't know if the main idea is going to be stated somewhere in the beginning, somewhere in the middle of the text, or at the end. I don't know where it's going to be, okay? Whereas we're going to talk in a minute about the other passages that kind of follow a structure and how it's easier to find the main idea there. These passages are primarily concerned with depicting one scene or emphasizing the qualities of characters. Answering the other questions can help you determine the main point of the passage. So in a little bit, we're going to talk about when I'm dealing with a literary narrative, sometimes if I'm not able to figure out exactly what the main idea is in the beginning, by answering some of the other questions, I may be able to figure out that main idea better. So sometimes it may be that if I'm not sure about the main idea and I've got a question asking about main idea, I'm going to mark that and put a question mark by it so I remember to go back to it after I've answered the other questions when I might have a better understanding of the passage, okay? So literary narrative doesn't follow a specific structure, so you've got to kind of have a good feel for the whole passage before you can determine the main idea. Humanities, social science, and natural science passages, the main idea is usually found at the end of the introductory paragraph, okay? That's going to be typical. The end of the introductory paragraph. So think about if you're writing a research paper or you've written papers for classes and you've kind of followed that structure of where you have the introduction and then you've got your body paragraphs and then you've got your conclusion. And so think about usually when you're writing an essay, you're telling basically in the first paragraph, this is what I'm writing about. And then my body paragraphs support that main idea or that topic. And then in your conclusion, you've kind of wrapped it all back together and you've identified the main idea again, okay? So usually the conclusion and the introduction paragraphs are going to be the first places you're going to look for main idea. First is the introduction, last is the conclusion. But sometimes it may not be explicitly stated there, and you also have to look at the body paragraphs as well. So the topic sentences of each body paragraph also provide information about the main idea because my body sentences are supporting my topic, okay? Questions about the main idea can also be asked about the choices the author made in crafting the passage, okay? All right, so here are strategies for determining the main idea for social science, humanities, or natural science passages. So like we said, try the main idea at the end of the introduction or the conclusion, okay? So if this is one of the types of paragraphs, like I said, with a literary narrative, we need to really read that one carefully and understand. So remember we talked about there's going to be different strategies for each type of writing. Literary narrative is telling a story. I've got characters, I've got something going on, I probably have some kind of change or development. I may have something that's kind of a timeline thing, and it's not going to be in order typically. It's going to, it may have an event that's going on, and then the author is flashbacking to a different time period, and then they come back to the present and stuff like that. So, understanding that sometimes we're looking for the chronology to understand the passage. So literary narrative just in itself doesn't have a structure, so you just got to read it, understand it, and follow it. social science, humanities, and natural science, I've got more of a structure to it, so I can kind of skim these passages, not reading them as closely as I would a literary narrative. I can kind of skim to get the idea of what it's talking about. I can get the idea of what things are supporting that, but I can also just read. I can go to my introduction and go to the end of the introduction. I can go to the conclusion and kind of skim through that. And then I can also reread the topic sentences from the body paragraphs, okay? Because my body paragraphs are supporting my main idea, usually I can look at those. So if I haven't been able to determine from the introduction or the conclusion, then I'm going to look at my topic sentences from my body paragraphs. And it says, because the topic sentence of the body paragraph should connect and support the main idea, reading them should help you get a more clear understanding. And then again, step 3 says, if you can't get it, still temporarily skip the main idea. Okay, that's where I said circle it, star it, put a question mark by it to make sure you refer back to it. So a lot of times by answering the other questions, it will help you get a better understanding of the passage as a whole. So if you're struggling with that main idea, first look at the introduction and conclusion. If you still can't figure it out, look at those introduction or the topic sentences of the body paragraphs. If you're still having trouble, skip the question and move on. So realistically, as you're going through a passage, before you even get to the questions, as you're reading, your main focus should be, what is this about? Why did they write it? What are they hoping I gain from this? And that's going to help you identify the main idea without going, okay, main idea, now I've got to go look for it. It should be something that jumps out at you as you're reading, and something that you don't even have to really think about. Okay, now I'm going to specifically look for it. Now, if you go, they presented a couple of ideas and I'm not real sure which one, I've got these couple of competing ideas, but which one is the main idea? Then I can look back to the passage and go, oh, wait, that was just introduced right here as a little portion, but all of this is pertaining to this one idea. Then that's your main idea, okay? So again, introduction and conclusion, topic sentence of the bodies. If you can't figure it out, mark it, go back to it after you've answered the other questions to see if you have a better understanding, okay? There are also another type of questions that are called function and detail questions. It says, when a question asks about the function of a paragraph or a sentence, look to the cited line or paragraph given by the question. So typically these are going to be the ones that say, in line so-and-so, blah, 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 what was the function of, or what was the purpose of the author saying blah, 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 okay? Or it'll say, what was the function of paragraph 3 in the grand scheme of the entire passage? So you're looking to see, what purpose did this sentence or paragraph serve? What function did it have? Okay, so again, it says, if you're looking for that, you want to look at the 3 sentences that lead up to that portion of the passage to help you remember what is the context in which this is being said. We're going to look at an example of one of these in just a bit, where it'll say, what was the meaning of this word, or what did they mean by that? We're going to look up a few sentences and go, okay, wait a minute, this is what they're talking about, so therefore I can figure out what is the function of that question. Okay, one of the things it says, if a passage describes sensory details, sight, sound, smell, and texture, expect that there's going to be a question about it. If they have chosen this passage and they're describing a scene using sensory items, expect that they are going to be asking a question regarding those senses, okay? So again, it's the kind of thing where knowing what kind of questions they may be asking helps you as you're reading the passage to go, oh, look, they're talking about senses here. I need to put a little star by that and maybe circle some of my words, because I know that there's probably gonna be a question about it. And so if I go ahead and mark it in my text, I can refer back to it quickly when I'm needing to find the evidence of it in the text, okay? So by learning these things that we're talking about right now is going to help you mark up the text as you're reading, because you're going to be able to go, ooh, that's probably going to be important. Ooh, that might be something I need to know. The next part is fact-finding. Fact-finding questions are fairly straightforward, and the answers are typically worded exactly as they appeared in the question. Okay? A main challenge of these questions is that they are not usually given a line of reference. So they usually don't say, look to line so-and-so of paragraph blah, 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 and tell me this answer. Usually if you're on a fact-finding mission, if they've said, what is blah, 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 and you've got to find it in the text, you've got to have a general idea of how the text is laid out. Okay, was that idea presented in the beginning of the passage, the middle of the passage, or the end of the passage? By kind of knowing the basic structure of the passage, you're able to say, oh, that's identified here, so let me jump here and look for it. And it says typical wrong answers for these types of questions are going to be ones that echo the language of the passage, but the content is not right. So the language may sound like it would be right, but when I actually look at the words and what they mean, it is actually not relating to what the passage was about. The next thing is inferences. In order to draw an inference, you must consider the information given and develop a general idea based on the details that are provided. Okay, so you look at what information they've given you, you look at the details that they've given you, and so these questions usually direct you to a certain line and ask you to make an interpretation. So it'll say in line so-and-so of the passage, what would you interpret, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so these are good because they've directed you where to look in the text. It says these answer choices will typically paraphrase the content. Okay, so it's not going to be a word for word. It's going to be a paraphrased answer that reflects on the content. Okay, so it's not going to be a word for word match. So I'm just looking for a paraphrasing there. The next thing, paraphrasing complex ideas. Sometimes you're asked to paraphrase a part of the passage that you're directed to. So here's the strategy for that. Focus on the subjects and verbs and ignore the modifiers. Okay, so if it says to paraphrase something, I want to look at the meat of the sentence and leave out the fluff. Okay, so I'm leaving out where it says, you know, the adjectives that are describing something or prepositional phrases. If it says, you know, something, something, which were, blah, 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 blah. I don't need to worry about all that extra. I'm looking at subject and verbs. So I've got the meat of what I'm looking for in that sentence, and all the fluff I don't worry about. Because those can distract you from the basic meaning of the sentence. Okay. Compare and contrast. Sometimes those questions will assess your ability to understand relationships, make inferences, draw conclusions. So sometimes that's going to be presented in a sequential thing. It might be given comparatively, and it may be cause and effect relationships. So it says you are able to determine similarity and differences between people, places, things, or concepts. Okay, so by understanding the sequence, the comparisons, or the cause and effect will help you determine these similarities. And so we've got some words here that signal similarities. When I see these words in the passage, I know that, hey, I've got something coming up that's going to be telling me something similar. So sometimes it's an elaboration word. It's something that we've given the information and we want to go in further detail. We want to elaborate on how they are alike. So additionally, also, as well as illustrated by, as shown by, essentially, first, furthermore. For example, for instance, in other words, in conclusion, in summary, in essence, second, such as, and moreover. So basically, they've given us something and they go, oh, well, I want to tell you a little bit more about that. I want to make sure you understand that this is something that is important. And then our comparison words would be likewise, in the same way, similarly, share, both, connected, linked, tied, joined, regular, and consistent. So when I see those words, I know that we're making a comparison there. All righty. Then we also have words that signal differences. So not only do we have words that signal similarities, we've got words that I know that we're getting ready to look at a different thing coming up. Those words are alternatively, alternately, although, but, despite, even though, in comparison, in spite of, however, on the one hand, on the other hand, otherwise, or nevertheless, rather, surprisingly, still, though, whereas, while, and yet. It says there are some other types of questions that will ask about direct relationships between persons, places, and things and concepts, and it's not describing similarities, differences, or cause and effect, okay? So just know that usually we can be looking at similarities, differences, cause and effect, but sometimes there's just questions that are asked about direct relationships and they're not related to any of those, so there's not those signal words to help you know that, hey, this is coming. One of the passages that we'll be reading today does deal with sequence, and it asks you questions about sequence. So know that if you've got a passage and it says it uses any of these sequence words, you're going to need to kind of identify the sequence as you're going to help you for when you answer those questions. You're not going to have to look so long for what you're looking for. So if it's an order situation, we've got after, before, begin, end, eventually, first, finish, initially, later, last, meanwhile, next, new, now, originally, once, prior, previously, start, second, soon, third, then, and subsequently. So that's going to be our order things. Maybe sometimes it's giving sequence in the sense of time period. And it says, you know, something about ago, or as a child, or as an infant, or at age 4. That's just an example. It could be at age 10, at age whatever. But when it says a specific age, when it talks about somebody being a baby, when it talks about years ago or last year, if it talks about maybe decades ago in the 70s, or, you know, centuries ago in the 1900s and the 1800s, whatever, turn of the century, modern, generation, eon, modern, ancient, old, and today. So all of that, and I've got modern in there twice, dealing with time periods. Okay, I'll mark that one out. So then frequency. If we're talking about the frequent occurrence of something, never, rarely, always, sometimes, frequently, monthly, each week, this Thursday, yearly, annually, daily, or weekly. If we see those frequency words, we are looking to see what are they talking about. Is it that they're frequently going somewhere? Is it an activity they were frequently doing? Was it, you know, what was it that was showing frequency there? And then finally, conclusions and endings. Ultimately, lastly, in the end, in conclusion, and finally. All right, so using those sequence words, sequence questions and literary narrative passage. Literary narrative passages usually focus on the order of events as they unfold in the narrative. Now, one thing to note is when the questions ask about the chronology of the passage, okay, so like it may say, what happened first? You need to know that that is not necessarily, and probably is not, the first action that is described in the passage. Okay, when they're talking about what happened first and they're talking about chronology, sometimes the author may be in the present talking about what's going on, and they may flash back to something that happened, and then they come back to the present. So I have to understand when they're describing these different situations, are they in the present? Are they flashing back? Are they talking about something that happened a year ago, or are we talking about something that happened 10 years ago? What is that relationship between what they're telling us? When we're dealing with natural science passages and talking about sequence, this is usually tracing the evolution or understanding of a specific idea or area of exploration. So sometimes it may start with, okay, this was kind of the long-held idea, and then because of these specific things that have happened, it has caused the person to think differently or to change their viewpoint, okay? So just kind of understanding the types of sequencing that you may see in a literary narrative and a natural science passage helps you to make those connections as you're reading the passage. Oh, look, it's talking about this. I know I'm going to be asked questions about that. Okay, so therefore you can underline, you can star it, you can circle, you can do whatever you need to do to say, hey, this is important information. Cause and effect. Sometimes ACT reading questions will ask about the cause and effect relationships within the passage, and we have cause and effect words. Accordingly, as a result, as such, because, cause, consequently, correlated, correlation, ergo, for, hence, outcome, results, since, so, source, thus, and therefore. So cause and effect relationships, if you're seeing that an event happened, therefore something else happened, I'm able to see that there's a relationship there because of what happened. And chances are, if you see cause and effect in the story, you're going to be seeing a question about cause and effect. So if you mark it, circle that word to help you, you can even then write out to the side, cause and effect, whatever you need to do to help you know that. So also in these sequence type situations, we may see questions about shifts. Maybe something has happened and we're shifting to either a new idea, we're shifting to a time period, we're changing from one belief or thought to another. And so it says, whenever a passage indicates a change has occurred, expect a question to be asked about that change. So here are my signal words to indicate shifts. Now, traditionally, typically, suddenly, in the past, usually, normally, used to, previously, before, but, however, nevertheless, regardless, after, change, shift, transformation, alter, and then maybe it says, you know, today it is understood that da-da-da-da-da, whereas previously it was understood whatever. So you're kind of seeing that shift in time there. Okay, so these are some skills to help you better answer key ideas and detail questions. Okay, the first one is read the text closely to determine the central ideas and themes. So as you are actually reading the passage before you read the questions, as you're reading, you try to say, okay, what is the big idea here? What is the theme? What are we describing? What are the examples used to describe it? What's going on here? Being able to summarize is a huge part, because if you read a passage about something that's given several details, being able to say, okay, in a nutshell, this is about this, and they did this, this, and this to prove that. That's a quick summary that's going to help you to process the passage better and understand it more fully to be able to ask the questions. Also, it helps you to really kind of understand the layout of the passage and how the author wrote it. So when you're asked questions, you're able to go to those specific places to find the answers. And then lastly, read closely to understand sequential, comparative, and cause and effect relationships. As you're reading, be on the lookout for these types of relationships. As you're reading, be able to say, hey, they are telling that this is in direct contrast to this. So these are opposite relationships. Oh, look, they're telling that they did this and it supported this idea. They're saying that, hey, they thought this happened, but then found that this happened. They're saying that because this happened, so it's cause and effect. So all of these different things are things that you're thinking about as you're reading, okay? So that is all I have for this section as far as being able to break down this section of key ideas and details, okay? These are all of the things that kind of help us as we're breaking these down. Millie, no, no barking. There's doggies barking outside and she wants to join in the fun. So anyway, what we'll do is, I know it's a little bit before break time, I guess only about 5 minutes before break time, but we can go ahead and break a little bit early for a minute, take a minute, and then we will come back. And when we come back, we're actually going to be looking at a reading practice test, and I sent that to you as well. So hopefully you've got it with you in front of you that we can kind of skim through it together and kind of practice marking up some of this stuff. So we'll start with that when we come back. So go ahead and take about 5-6 minutes. All righty, we'll go ahead and get back and get started on this. Let's see. All righty. So like I said, my passages are always going to follow the same pattern. Okay, so my first passage is always going to be my literary narrative. And another way of just describing this is going to be like a story. Okay, we've got a story, we've got characters. We only have a snippet or just a part of a bigger story. So in that sense, we're only pulling out a part of the story. So it's not a complete story where I have a beginning, middle, and end. Okay. I'm not going to have the beginning introduction. I'm not going to have the climax that's going on. And then I'm not going to have the resolution at the end. I'm not going to have that story pattern. I'm only going to have an excerpt of what it is that's going to involve some characters and something going on. And so again, we're looking at it and going, okay, so this is what it is. Why? What are we getting? What are we getting from this? Okay. So what I'm going to do is, in this sense, we're not actually working through this to, worrying about time and things like that. What I want to do with this is just kind of break it down. And as I'm going through it, talk about the things that I'm going to find important and kind of talk about, in what I find important and you find important, maybe different things, but hopefully you've got it. So as we're reading through, if there's something you find important, underline it, circle it, do whatever. Remember, you can write all in this booklet. So as you're reading, if you see something, see some of these transition words that we've just talked about, if you see some cause and effect relationships, if you see something dealing with sequencing and time period, you know now that those are things that you need to pay attention to, okay? Because more than likely you're going to be asked about them. So we'll go ahead and get started with this. Again, literary narrative, like a story. It says it's adapted from an essay. Okay, so it was an essay called Rough Water. Again, I don't necessarily need to spend too much time looking at that. I do want to look and see where it's from, but then keep going. Okay, one of my best races could hardly be called a race at all. I was a senior in high school. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and underline that because it's given me a time period. Okay, gunning to qualify for the USA Junior Nationals. The previous summer, so again, I've got another time period thing. So now he's a senior in high school. Previous summer, I had missed the cut by less than a second in the mile. And just the day before at my high school regional meet, so we've got day before he was at a high school regional meet, I had come in with 0.3 of a second in the 500-yard freestyle. The qualification time was 4:39.69. I swam 4:39.95. So again, although I don't necessarily need to focus on those numbers, one of the things, you can see here is that we see a relationship that he was very close. That's the main thing to know here. I don't need to get bogged down on the numbers, just understanding that he was pretty close. It says the next Sunday, I drove with my mother to the far side of Houston. They've given me a location where a time trial was being held. And so we're talking about this time trial, an informal, unadvertised event thrown together at the last minute. The only races swum were those with swimmers the swimmers requested to swim. So again, they're only swimming races that the swimmer says, hey, I want to swim this. Most were short, flapping sprints in which swimmers attempted to shave off a few 1/100ths of a second. I didn't have the courage to face the mile. And since I'd struck out on the 500 that day, the day before, I decided to swim the 1,000-yard freestyle, 40 lengths of the pool. It was a race I'd swum fast enough to believe that given the right confluence of circumstances, cold water, an aggressive heat, an energetic meet, I could make the cut. I had 15 seconds to drop to qualify. So by reading through that first paragraph, we know where he is right now. We know some things that he's experienced previously. We know that he's swimming. Okay, so he's swimming at a meet. We know that he's trying to qualify for USA Junior Nationals. We know that he is so close. So those are all kind of things that we've read here in this. He's gone to a meet where he has asked to swim something. By the time I stood on the blocks, I was not only the only one in the race, I was practically the only one in the natatorium. Okay, again, I don't have a clue what a natatorium is. I'm not gonna worry about it. All right. The horn sounded and I dove in. I was angry and disheartened at having missed the cut the day before, and I had little belief that I could go any faster today. Okay, so here we're kind of getting state of mind. He's disheartened, he's angry, he doesn't believe he can do any better. About 600 yards in, my coach started to pace. I stayed steady on, not in a hurry, not about to get my hopes up. In my mind, I had already missed the time. Then a boy from a rival high school, whom I hardly knew, unfolded his legs and climbed down from the bleachers and started to cheer. He squatted low to the water and pointed his finger toward the end of the pool as if to say, "That's where you're going. Now hurry up. If he's cheering, maybe I'm close." So now we've seen a shift here. He had this mindset of basically, I'm terrible. I'm not going to make it. I can't do it. To then he sees his coach is pacing. He's got this other kid that's from a rival school going, down there, down there, down there. So you can see this shift in his mood and his attitude. He's changing. Sometimes a moment comes along when the world slows down, and though everything else moves around us at the same frenetic speed, we're afforded the opportunity to reflect in real time rather than in retrospect. So this right here, I'm just going to kind of mark because he's been telling details, events. All right, I just got the text from my husband. Praise the Lord, my daughter's negative again. Megan, you weren't on earlier when I told you that when I was saying that my daughter got up this morning, she's all congested, she doesn't feel good. I'm kind of feeling the same way. And she was like, "Mom, I can't smell anything." So then I started panicking. Great, we got COVID, we're gonna have to quarantine. She's negative. Praise the Lord. So I've already been thinking about, oh my goodness, what does that mean? We've got a quarantine, and how do we do that? At least we got fall break coming up.
I mean, that's good that she's negative.
Oh, absolutely. So it's the kind of thing where it's got to be allergies and congestion again. And I feel like we've done this loop. I don't know how many times. She's had the crud. We've tested. It's negative. So, but I mean, I'm just like, I don't know what to do because I don't want to send her to school if it's possibly. But anyway, huge relief. Sorry for that. I totally interrupted our train of thought here. But anyway, like I said, he's given these events of what's going on, and then he puts this in here. So this is one of those things where I say, okay, this is something different. He's talking in a different way. So I know that there's something significant about it. So that's why I'm kind of putting a little mark by it. It doesn't matter how you mark it. I'm just marking it like that because I'm saying, hey, there's something going on here. So he said, sometimes we have those situations where everything kind of slows down. We're kind of in a situation where we're able to reflect on something immediately and what's going on. And it says, it is though we slip into a wormhole in the fabric of time and space, travel into the past, and then back again in the same and to the present in the same instant. So have you ever had those situations where you've got something going on and it takes you back to the past for a minute, but yet, I mean, it's just a split second. So that's what he's talking about here is he has this memory. And it says, that morning swimming, I remembered a day in late September the year before. So again, he's giving some time period. So we want to make sure to identify that. The last day my swim team had use of an outdoor pool. All summer long, my teammates and I swam under an open sky. After this day, we would spend the rest of the season in a dank and moldy indoor pool. So basically here, we've said outdoor pool, good, indoor pool, bad, okay? We're able to look and see kind of his opinions of that. So we're still at the outdoor pool. It says the triangular backstroke flags were strung across the lanes and the adjacent diving well. My teammates like to run down the long cement deck, jump out over the diving well, and try to grab hold of the line. Have you ever done that when you've been, my kids used to do this all the time in the grocery store, when there'd be signs hanging from the ceiling and they would run down the aisles and see who could jump up and touch the sign first? So that's kind of, again, I'm making a connection here, and I'm picturing this kid, and they're jumping up and trying to get those flags, trying to jump up and get those flags. So especially if everybody else is doing it, you want to do it too. So again, as we're reading, we're kind of trying to make these connections because it helps us to understand it better. Flags are out there. Everybody's trying to jump and grab hold of it. Many of them could jump far enough to make it. I could not, though I tried every day. I tried that day and missed. Since I would not have another shot until May, I decided to try again. I squared up and ran, my feet wet against the pavement, and just as my foot hit the water's edge, one of my teammates called out, "Jump!" I bent my knees and pushed off hard and got my hand around the flag line. I pulled the whole thing into the water. Autumn was coming, and I wondered if there was a metaphor in what I had just done. A fortune folded inside a cookie. My greatest effort would come when I was down to my last opportunity. So again, in this moment of reflection, he's thinking about this event, what he did, and now he's trying to connect these things together, okay? He's using this experience of where he tried and tried and tried and missed, and finally he got it. So now he's going, I've tried and tried and tried and missed to get my time to qualify. Maybe I finally got it. Now it was March, and I was down to my last opportunity. All right, here's his last opportunity, thinking about that day and hearing the word jump as my eyes followed the finger of the boy pointing me onward. What I understood, not later, but right then in the water, was how this little swim added up to the world. I had spent more than a year training for this one swim, and when it was finished, the world would be no different than before it began. So basically saying, in the grand scheme of things, this does not matter. This one swim does not matter in the grand scheme of all the swimming in the world. It mattered because it was the task before me now, the thing I wanted now. So there's a lot of things that we do that in the grand scheme of things, it's not going to make a big deal, but it's something that's important to us. Swimming, I had long understood, is a constant choice between the now and the later. Exhaustion now for the sake of fitness later. All those Friday nights spent in the pool in pursuit, and the end that seemed always one step farther on. I was out of the laters. This was the end, and I made my choice. I cashed in the energy I set aside for climbing out of the pool and unfolding my towel and tying my shoes. I've never sprinted harder in my life, not before and not since. I hit the wall. I knew by instinct, by the spasm of my tendons and the ache in my bones before I ever turned around the clock, before I turned toward the clock or heard my coach scream that I had made it. Okay. So we've kind of gone through, and you can see that all I basically did was, hold on just a minute. Okay. So all I did was I kind of underlined and circled. So it's the kind of thing where when I look back, I've got things underlined to help me jump out at each paragraph. Again, though, because I have read through it, I've got a feel for the beginning of the passage is talking about here he is kind of where he is right now. We know what he's trying to do. Okay, he gets up, he goes, and then he has that shift in his thinking. He's kind of defeated, doesn't think he's going to make it. He's got this shift in his thinking because he remembered back a situation that happened previously about grabbing the flags. And then now he has shifted the way he was approaching the race. In the beginning, he's going, I'm not going to make it, not going to do it. What's the point? He's thinking about, I got to save some of my energy to climb out of the pool and unfold my towel and put on my shoes. So what's the point? But then because he has this memory, he sees this kid pointing and going, hey, come on, come on, come on. Then he gets that renewed motivation. So he's jumping in, he's giving it everything he's got because this is the one last chance he's got. Okay? So now, we're going to look at the questions. And it says, so what I want to do is we're going to circle certain questions, okay? Because there's some of them that we're not going to bother with answering right now. We're going to wait until next week to answer those. So let's circle some certain questions. I'm going to tell you which ones because these are going to be the ones that pertain to the type of questions that we have discussed today. So we are looking at the questions that deal with key ideas and details. So go ahead and we're going to circle number 2, circle number 4, number 5, 6 and 7, circle numbers 9 and 10, okay, so you can see about this one passage that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the questions are dealing with key ideas and details. Okay, so this one passage has 7 of these. Okay, so let's look at number 2. Which of the following events mentioned in the passage happened first chronologically? Okay, so it's talking about not which one did he tell you about first in the passage, which one happened first in his life chronologically. Letter F, the narrator stood on the blocks at the Sunday time trial his senior year. G, the narrator leaped out over the diving well in late September. H, the narrator swam the 500-yard freestyle in the high school regional meet as a senior. Or J, the narrator heard a boy from a rival school cheering. So when I think about these things, thinking about the story, we know he's in his senior year right now, so everything that's happening right now is his senior year. So I know when it says senior year, I can mark those off. We know that the boy cheering from a rival school is happening right now, so I can mark that out. The memory he had was from earlier in September. The memory he had was well before he had done this. The memory that he had was pulling the flags. So chronologically, that's what happened first. Okay? When we look back at the story, now if you couldn't remember, you'd look back at the story and you'd try to figure that out. But because we have an understanding of the story and we have an understanding of the progression of the story, we know that that memory, that flashback was something that happened previously. So anything that's going on with junior year or with senior year, anything that's going on right now is a non-answer. Now, but now in the story, the first thing that's happening first is here he is, he's in his senior year and he's doing a swim. Okay, so that's one of the ways that it can trick you up is if you think of, oh, I've got to go in order, what was the first thing that happened in the story? That's one thing, but chronologically is different. At any point that we're going through these things and you don't understand when we go through an answer, if you go, yeah, but how did you really figure that out? Please let me know. Don't just nod your head and go, okay, great, yay. Number 3, the narrator indicates that when he swam the 1,000-yard freestyle in the time trials, the world for a minute seemed to, okay? Speed up, blurring past and present events, rush past, forcing him to reflect in retrospect, move in slow motion as he did with everything around him, or slow down, allowing him to reflect in real time. Now, one of the things I want you to notice about these 2 types of answers, the first 2 say speed up and rush. Okay, so these first 2 are saying, did time speed up or did time slow down? So I've got 2 that say speed up, 2 that say slow down. Well, again, it's the kind of thing where if you kind of remember what he talked about, and he will remember that he said everything kind of slowed down, I can go ahead and eliminate F and G, because I know he did not say it all sped up and everything kind of slammed together and, you know, everything's a blur. That's not what he talked about. He talked about everything kind of slowed down. Now I can go back and say, okay, well, he said it all slowed down. Let me go back to that point. Oh, wait, remember, that was the thing that I indicated here and said, oh, that's going to be important. So I'm going to read back over that. Sometimes a moment comes along when the world slows down, and though everything else moves around us at a frenetic speed, we're afforded the opportunity to reflect in real time rather than in retrospect. So we're able to reflect on that. Okay, so now I go back and look at my answer choices, allowing him to reflect in real time. That's what it told me in the passage. So I'm able to determine, even though these both say slow down, it doesn't say everything around him slowed down. It said it allowed him to reflect. Okay. Number 5. The passage indicates that during the narrator's swim at the time trial, he understood for the first time that A, his goals would always be one step farther on. B, he had trained for this swim for over a year. C, the swim was an event that was important to him alone. Or D, swimming is a choice between the now and the later. Okay, so during his swim at the time trial, we've got to think about, so when we get to that, we can reflect back to that. Now it was March, down to my last opportunity. This is where he's kind of thinking about all this. He says, what I understood, not later, but now, right then. So by looking at the text, we're saying this is something that he understood right then. It mattered because the task was before me now, something I wanted now. This is where we talked about in the grand scheme of things, what was, you know, the world didn't matter. What the world expected, what the world thought, it was his here and now. Okay? So when we look at our choices, his goal would always be one step farther on. Nope, we know that's not it. He had trained for this swim for over a year. He had been training for a while, but it doesn't talk about that. He doesn't talk about that. He talked about how this was an event that was important to him and him alone. Okay? Not that swimming is a choice between the now and later. He did talk about that. He did talk about how, you know, you train and you do all this stuff and how that's then and then, you know, between now and later. But he's not talking about that being a choice. He makes a specific thing to talk about how this was something important to him right now, right here. In the grand scheme of things, not a huge important deal, but it's important to him. Number 6, based on the passage, the end, the narrator mentions in line 80, most likely refers to final pursuit of fitness, last chance to qualify, memory of his final Friday night of practice, or ultimate realization that he had defeated the other competitors in the race. Well, first of all, when I read that and it talks about other competitors in the race, who was he swimming against? Does anybody remember what the text said? He was swimming by himself. There are no other competitors. So it specifically said that he was swimming by himself. So immediately, without even looking back, I know he doesn't have other competitors he's competing against. He's competing against himself, basically. He's competing against his previous time. So I know that I can go ahead and mark that one out right there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to line 80, and I'm looking at where it talks about the end. Okay? So here is 80. And here's the word end. So remember how I talked about how sometimes when it directs us to a passage or to a place, we want to backtrack a few sentences to make sure we understand the context of what's going on and what they're saying this in. So I'm going to go back here where he says, swimming I had long ago understood as a constant choice between the now and the later. And it says, remember, this is where he says he long understood that. Earlier, that was given as a possible answer. He did say that it is a choice between now and later, but remember the question asked about what did he realize right then and there? Right then and there, he realized that it was him and him alone that this race was important to, because he had understood for a long time it was the now and later. Exhaustion for the sake of fitness later, all those Friday nights spent in the pool, in pursuit of the end that seemed always one step farther on. I was out of laters. This was the end, and I made my choice. So here, he's talking about the pursuit, that final chance to get to qualifying for nationals. He's not pursuing fitness through this. He's not saying that if I do this, I've achieved ultimate fitness. I've reached my goal of being super fit. Nope. He is not talking about his last final Friday night practice. That was when he was grabbing the flags. Okay. In this particular passage, he is talking about this is it. This is his last chance to qualify. Number 7, the narrator of the passage characterizes the time trial in Houston. Here I've got a keyword, Houston. So again, I'm going to read my possible answer choices so I know when I go back to the paragraph and locate where it talks about Houston, I can figure out which one it's talking about. So real quick, I'm going to look at my possible answer choices. One long sprint in which swimmers attempted to improve their times. A meet advertised as a way to qualify for the junior nationals. A regional meet that featured only the 500 and the 1,000. Or an informal swimming event put together at the last minute. So I'm going to go back to the passage where it talks about Houston. Okay. Mom took me to the far side of Houston where a time trial was being held, an informal, unadvertised event thrown together at the last minute. So again, word for word from the passage, an informal swimming event put together at the last minute. So I have that keyword there, Houston. So I'm able to say, okay, I know I've got to go to the part of the passage that talks about Houston. And then I'm able to find word for word that connection. Number 9, for the narrator, compared to practicing in the outdoor pool, practicing in the indoor pool is. So we're comparing outdoor and indoor. I'm going to go back. Well, before I do that, I want to read my answer possibilities and then go back. Is it more productive, more liberating, less appealing, or less competitive? So again, I've got 2 things giving more, 2 things giving less. I have to determine which I'm talking about. Is it more or less? And then what is it more or less of? So I'm going to go back to where we're talking about that last practice at the pool. And that was in where he's reflecting. I remembered a day in September, year before, last day outdoor pool. All along we had swam over to the open sky. After this day, we would spend the rest of the season in a dank and moldy indoor pool. If he's describing it as dank and moldy, is he real excited about that? Is he looking forward to that? No.
Nope.
He's gone from, open sky, outside, open sky, dank and moldy. So we can see that he's not as excited about it. So when we look at our answer choices again, more productive, more liberating. Nope, I didn't see anything in that passage about that. Less appealing, less competitive. He's not talking about competition. He's talking about the appeal of it. He's not looking forward to it. When you talk about something being appealing, if something is appealing, you're interested, you're excited, you're looking forward to it. If something is not appealing, you're kind of like, ugh, I don't want to do it. It's gross and bad, whatever. And so he said, you can tell that he is not excited about this because it's going to be dank and moldy. And then number 10, when the narrator heard jump in his mind while swimming in line 67, so I've got jump in 67, he was most likely remembering his teammates' command the day the narrator caught the flag, his own shout as he leapt off the outdoor pool's deck that fall, the cheers of the cheer of the boy from the rival school, or the abrupt start of his race that Sunday. So I'm going to go back to 67, where they told me to go. And line 67, so I've got 65, 66, 67 is going to be right there, the word jump. So I'm going to back up a little bit. Now it was March, and I was down to my last opportunity thinking about that day and hearing the word jump. He's just told us about when he grabbed the flags. So he says it's March, thinking about the day and hearing the word jump as my eyes followed the finger of the boy pointing me onward. So again, here in this same sentence, we're talking about when he jumped, when somebody yelled jump and he grabbed the flags. We're also talking about he's making the connection of that spurring on, somebody going, jump, do it, as the same as the boy's pointing, you know. But when he says jump, it has nothing to do with the boy pointing. They're in the same sentence, but the word jump is referring back to the boy that told him to grab the flags. So when I look at my answer choices again, teammates command the day the narrator caught the flag line. So that's what we're talking about, is the day he caught the flags. He didn't say anything about him leaping. He didn't say anything. We know that the boy is there pointing and cheering him on, but the boy didn't yell jump. And he doesn't, you know, the jump is not referring to the start of the race. Okay. So like I said, kind of having, when I pre-read a literary narrative, again, I need to read the whole passage, and I kind of need to read it closely, and I need to mark it up to be able to identify details and important things and transitions and changes and thoughts and beliefs and sequential things with timelines. I'm doing all of that as I'm doing my first reading. I'm marking it up and doing all that. So then when I go back to the questions, because these are the questions that you can go directly to the text to look for your answers. It's going to tell you what they think and what they feel and what they did. It's going to tell you all those things, so you can go directly to the text. You're not having to really to make an inference or make a connection, or being able to take the details and make a guess about what they're talking about. All of this is right there in the text, okay? And it's a majority of it. So realistically, 7 out of these 10 problems, 10 questions, I was able to go back to the text and link those answers to, okay? So let's go ahead and look at a different type of passage. Remember, we said the literary narrative does not follow a specific structure. It's a story, but yet my other passages are going to follow a specific structure. So I'm going to move on to the next one. So our first one was a literary narrative. Our second one is going to be a social science passage. Okay, so we talked about how it's always going to go in that same order. Now also notice that here I've got passage A and passage B. So remember, we talked about how in the reading there are paired passages. You're going to get one of your passages that is going to be a paired passage. So that means that you're going to have 2 articles that are related in some way, shape, or form, and you've got to figure out what is the relation, or are they presented because they're polar opposites? What is it that's going on here? So again, this is going to be more with it being social science, I know it's going to be a nonfiction, okay? It's not a made-up story. It's going to be a nonfiction piece that's going to be telling me some facts and details. So I'm going to start with passage A. In early September of 1929, I'm going to underline that because I know I'm talking about timeline. Nikolai Vavilov, and again, if you don't know how to pronounce his name, you could call him Nicky V. It doesn't matter what you call him, okay? It doesn't matter that you know exactly what his name is, or that you can pronounce it. Don't let that hang you up, going Nico. Don't waste your time on that. Call him, you know, Nick V. Famed Russian plant explorer and botanist, arrived in the Central Asian crossroads of Alma-Ata, Kazakhstan. Okay, again, if you don't know that says Kazakhstan, who cares? Okay. So we know that we've got this guy. It's in 1929, so we know that we're not talking about here and now. We're talking about in the early start of the century. We have a Russian plant explorer and botanist that has come into an Asian area called Alma-Ata. Climbing up the whatever kind of slopes in the Titan Shan Mountains separating Kazakhstan, so we know he's climbing a mountain that separates Kazakhstan from China. He found thickets of wild apples stretching in every direction, an extensive forest of fruit colored russet red, creamy yellow, and vibrant pink. So again, when I'm reading this, I'm picturing in my mind thickets, extensive forest. I know that means that this forest is packed with apples of all different colors, okay? Nowhere else in the world do apples grow thickly as a forest or such incredible diversity. Nowhere else in the world do apples grow thickly as a forest or with such incredible diversity. So we know we've got the diverse part of all the different colors of apples. Amazed by what he saw, he wrote, I could see with my own eyes that I had stumbled upon the center of the origin for the apple. So he's saying, hey, this has got to be where apples started. This has got to be the origin because they are growing in abundance and they're all different. With extraordinary pre-science and a few facts, Vavilov suggested that the wild apples he had seen growing in the Tian Shan were in fact the ancestors of the modern apple. He tracked the whole process of domestication to the mountains near Alma-Ata, where the wild apples looked awfully similar to the apples found at the local grocery store. So here we say he has tracked down this lineage of apples, which sounds like a super exciting job. And he's found that they look similar to the apples you see at the grocery. So it's not like it's an ancestor of an apple and it looks like a grape or looks like something tiny, or it's not huge and now it's smaller. We see that they're similar. They're very similar to what we see now. And it says, unfortunately, Vavilov's theory would remain mostly unknown for decades. And I'm going to mark that because they've put that word in there, unfortunately. So that tells me, okay, something's up with that. Exactly where the apple came from had long been a matter of contention and discussion. So matter of contention and discussion for a long time between people who study plant origins. Vavilov imprisoned by Joseph Stalin in 1940 for work in plant genetics. So again, we know that his article was written in 1929. This reference is 1940, so it's talking about something that happened to him later. He did work in plant genetics that challenged Stalin's belief, and he died in Leningrad prison in 1943. Only after the fall of communism in Russia did Vavilov's theory, made more than half a century earlier, become widely recognized. So his theory that he put out before did not become recognized until much later in time. As Vavilov predicted, it is now believed that all the apples known today are direct descendants of the wild apples that evolved in Kazakhstan. Apples do not comprise all of Kazakhstan's plant bounty, however. Okay, so now we're seeing a shift here. We see that word, however, we're going from talking about apples to other plant species. At least 157 other plant species found in Kazakhstan are either direct precursors or close wild relatives of domesticated crops. Okay, so we know that here we've got a shift and we're going from apples to other types of plants, but they're saying that more than likely this is where they started from, or they're closely related, close wild relatives of domesticated crops. So again, think about domesticated crops. We're talking about these are growing wildly. Domesticated means you're purposely growing them, okay? The name of Kazakhstan's largest city, Alma-Ata, or Almaty, as it's known today, even translates as father of the apples, or according to some, where the apples are. So this news about the apple's origins was probably no surprise to the residents, particularly in towns where apple seedlings are known to grow up through the cracks of the pavements. The apple has been evolving in Central Asia for upwards of 4.5 million years. So we've got this first piece. We've got this guy who has this theory. He goes and sees it, but because he writes something that goes against the dictator's beliefs, he gets locked up. His theory never gets to get out there, okay? Now we've got passage 2 that's by a different person, okay? One of the things I should have told you at first was looking at the beginning where passage A is adapted from the book Apple, A Global History. The other one is The Fatherland of the Apples. Really doesn't make a big difference there, but we're just seeing here we've got the different author. Nikolai Vavilov is widely regarded as the world's greatest plant explorer, for he made over 250,000 seed fruit tuber collections on 5 continents. Okay, so he made over 250,000 seed, fruit, and tuber collections on 5 continents. So he did extensive work here. Something conservationist, somebody credits him with first recognizing, so he's getting credit for first recognizing that Kazakhstan was the center of the origin of diversity for apples. It is not surprising, she concedes, that when Vavilov first came to Kazakhstan to look at plants, he was so amazed. Nowhere else in the world do apples grow as a forest. That is one reason why he stated that this is probably where the apple was born. This was its birthing grounds. Discerning where a crop originated and the greatest portion of its genetic diversity remains extant. Let me start that over. Discerning where a crop originated and where the greatest portion of its genetic diversity remains extant may seem esoteric to the uninitiated. So again, in that, I'm having trouble saying those words. More than likely, they're going to be words that we don't necessarily understand, but we've got to look at, and so basically it's saying being able to figure out where a crop started and where it, it's diverse, may not be, understood, whatever, but knowing exactly where our food comes from geographically, culturally, and genetically is important. So it's saying so by reading on, I'm seeing where it may say that although this may be something, it's not important to know that, but what is important is to know and understand the geographical, cultural, and genetic relationships there. And it says, because of the issue of food security. Food security means that you are not fearful for getting food, okay? What are you doing? Hang on just a minute, guys. Sorry, guys. Okay, so we're in the second article. We're talking about understanding where the food comes from, and the genetics of it is important because about food insecurity. The variety of food that we keep in our fields, orchards, and secondarily in our seed banks is critically important in protecting our food supply from plagues, crop diseases, catastrophic weather, and political upheavals. Vavilov himself was personally motivated to become an agricultural scientist by witnessing several families during the Tsarist era of Russia. He hoped that by combining more diverse seed portfolio with knowledge from both traditional farmers and collaborative scientists, the number of Russian families suffering from hunger might be reduced. So in that, he's saying he's going to look at traditional farmers and scientists to help to be able to reduce hunger. In a very real sense, the forest of wild foragers and the orchards of traditional farmers and such centers of crop diversity are well springs of diversity that plant breeders, pathologists, and entomologists return to every time our society whittles the response in our fields or orchards down to its breaking point. So basically it's saying that, you know, they return to this diversity and information every time we see some kind of shift where society is kind of maybe eliminating or orchards are starting to get to the breaking point. And whittle away we have done. Here in North America, according to apple historian Dan Bussey, some 16,000 apple varieties have been named and nurtured over the last 4 centuries. By 1904, however, the identities and sources of only 7,098 of those varieties could be discerned by USDA scientist W.H. Reagan. Since then, some 6,121 apple varieties, 82% of Reagan's 1904 inventory, have been lost from nursery catalogs, farmers markets, and from the American table. So we can see that it started out with all kinds of varieties, and every year it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller as far as the varieties and the types of apples. And so then also, you know, in reading this article, thinking about if you've ever gone to the grocery store with a parent or you've been the one to do the shopping and you've seen all the different kinds of apples, and you've got yellow apples and green apples and red apples. And in the red apples, you've got Red Delicious and you've got Gala and you've got Fuji and you've got all these different types of apples. And you go, how are these alike and how are they different? Think about if we had 16,000 types of apples out there that we had to figure out from. Okay, but again, paired passages. So immediately as I'm reading the second passage, I am trying to discern, how are these two passages alike? How are these two passages different? Okay, so in their similarity, they're both talking about apples. They're both talking about the origin, the study of the apples. How they're different is that in the first one, we have this guy talking about his specific study and his specific information. And then in the second one, we're referring to his studies to show information. Okay, so we're looking at that. All right, so for these questions, the numbers that we're going to focus on right now will be numbers 13, 14, and 17. 13, 14, and 17. Now, what I want you to think about is from literary narrative, where 7 of the 10 questions were this type of passage. Now we're shifting to more of like a research study, and we can see that only 3 of the questions are about the types of skills we learned. So 13, passage A makes which of the following claims about the plant species found in Kazakhstan? Passage A, plant species, Kazakhstan. Approximately 157 species of cultivated temperate fruits originated in Kazakhstan. Okay, that number 157 stands out to me because I remember them talking about 157 species. I also remember them talking about something about 90% of something. Okay, again, here I've got 90%, and then I have 157 plant species. So I know I'm trying to focus in on where we're talking about 157 and 90%, but I've got to figure out which of these have true information. So remember how we said part of the part of the solution is true and the other part is false. That's what's going to happen here. One of my answers is either going to be about the 157 species or 90%, but the second part of one of my non-answers is not going to be the right information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that section where it talks about those numbers. Okay, so when I'm looking through, and I can go and I see 157 plant species, wild relatives of domesticated crops, including 90% of all of the cultivated temperate fruits. Okay, so there's my one sentence I need to focus on. And so I've got 97 plant species. They are either direct precursors or close wild relatives of domesticated crops. Remember, domesticated, we talked about how domesticated is the opposite of growing wild, including 90% of all cultivated. So when I say 157, 157 is going with domesticated, 90 is going with cultivated. So now let's look back at our answer choices. Here, I've got 157 with cultivated. If I look back at that, my 157 went with domesticated. So this is one of those examples where they've given me a true part of the first, but the second part, and a partly wrong answer is a completely wrong answer. These two things do not connect, so A is not here. 90% of all domesticated crops. So when I go up here, 90% goes with cultivated. So again, a partly wrong answer is a completely wrong answer. Of the plant species found in Kazakhstan, 90% of the species were apples. Well, goodness gracious, it doesn't say that 90% were apples. We've got 157 other plant species other than apples. And then I look at D, aside from apples, at least 157 plant species found in Kazakhstan were either direct precursors or close wild relatives of domesticated crops. And that was exactly what it said in my highlighted pink. 157 other species were either direct precursors or close wild relatives. So we know that D is my answer. Okay. So this was an example of one of those answers to where they have connected the information the wrong way. So they're trying to give you information from the text, but they're making incorrect connections there. So you've got to look back to see, okay, was this connected to this? No, it was not. So that is a wrong answer. Okay. I know we're running close on time. So we had 14 and 17. Passage B most strongly suggests that Vavilov was motivated to become an agricultural scientist primarily because remember he talked about seeing hungry people, okay? So in 14, that's going to be J, hope to feed others. He wasn't interested in being published. He wasn't, he didn't want to work with a famous botanist. He wasn't trying to, deal with the financial crisis. He was just wanting to make sure people weren't hungry. And then 17 in passage B, it can most reasonably be inferred from the third paragraph in 74 to 79 that centers of crop diversity become crucially important when. So 74 through 79. I know this is the part right here, and this is the part where we talked about how sometimes when our society whittles the resilience in our fields and orchards. So we know that that means when we're getting low or things are whittling down. So when we look at the answers, plant breeders would like to learn more about species in Central Asia. Nothing was said in those lines. Problems with a cultivated crop require experts to research a new variety. Again, there is nothing mentioned. Hold up. Problems with a cultivated crop require experts to research. So that's a possibility because when we look at that one, it talks about well springs of diversity that plant breeders, pathologists, and entomologists return to every time our society whittles the resilience in our fields and orchards. So we're going to hang on to that one as a possible answer. And then consumers would like more variety in the grocery store, not mentioned. Disputes among plant breeders, pathologists, and entomologists. So again, we've got plant breeders, pathologists, and entomologists, but they're not talking about disputes. And so by being able to eliminate my answers, I'm able to reveal the correct answer. Okay? All righty. So what I would like you to do is real quick, I want you to go on, skip over the next passage, but go to where you have numbers 22 through 30. I want you to circle the numbers that I call out to you. Okay, I'm sorry, 21 starts on page 36 of the page. So starting with number 21, circle 21, 24 and 25, 27, 28, and 29. And then on the last passage, which is on at the bottom, it says page 39. We're starting with number 30. Oh, sorry, page before starts with 31. Circle 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 38, 39, and 40. So your homework is to read through those passages as we did the first ones, identify information that jumps out at you, circle, underline, do whatever you need to do, and then I want you to use the passages to answer these questions. That's where we will pick up next week. So that is your homework, is to do these passages, catch up on anything else you might be behind on. And then for those of you that I need to email all of the reading that we had for last week that I just didn't pass out. And Victoria, I will send you everything that you need to get caught up as well. Okay. If you have questions or anything that you need before next Wednesday, let me know. And obviously next Wednesday is fall break, so we will not be meeting in person at fall break. It'll be the Wednesday afterward. We'll be back at the co-op. Okay. All right, sorry for running over a minute today. I hope y'all have a great week. Let me know if you need help, and I will see y'all in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.